Hello, I'm John Glazer, company founder, whiskey maker at Compass Box, and I want to talk to you again about our love of pairing whiskey with food, in particular pairing whiskey with cheese. And I want to talk about Flaming Heart. We've got two cheeses we've chosen for Flaming Heart. This is our 2018 edition of Flaming Heart, the sixth edition of Flaming Heart over the years that we've done. It's become a real favorite around the world. I guess, because it's quite special. There's really no whiskey in Scotland, that we're aware of, with the flavor profile of Flaming Heart. It combines malt whiskies aged in finished in French oak barrels, heavily toasted French oak barrels, with malt whiskies from the island of Islay that are peaty and smoky. And there's quite some quite old whiskies in the blend as well that gives it depth and an ethereal character and weight and length. It's a beautiful whiskey to match with cheese. It can match with all sorts of different kinds of cheeses. We tend to think of peaty whiskies with blue vein cheeses, and we've got one here. But also, this whiskey works well with cheeses, other types of cheeses, as you'll see. Flaming Heart. I've just described that idea of smoke and sweet, from the smoke from the Islay whiskies, the sweet from the French oak finished whiskies, and it was a whiskey. We came up with a whiskey and then attached the name to it after a time. I keep these lists of name ideas, have for years, and Flaming Heart was always on that list for a long time. I first came across it, a song by the American guitar player M. Ward. He wrote a song called Flaming Heart, and I thought that'd be a great name for a whiskey. But then we had to find a whiskey that fit the name, and Flaming Heart was it. Matching whiskey with cheese. A couple of pointers and thoughts from us. Glassware. I love using wine glasses for cheese. Nosing glasses behind me, they're great, but they're nosing glasses. They're for nosing. They're not for the pleasures of drinking like a wine glass. So this really allows you to get your nose into the glass of the whiskey, and it's much easier to drink from. Temperature. I like our whiskeys cool, below room temperature, below 20 degrees Celsius, below 68 Fahrenheit, when you're drinking like this. And then water. I love adding water. Now, I know a lot of you out there love to drink your whiskeys like this neat, but I love adding water when you match whiskeys with cheese, because adding that water lowers the alcohol content, opens up the whiskeys, and I think you can appreciate the combination of flavors between the whiskey and the cheese even better when it's at a slightly lower alcohol. So that's how we do it. So let's get going here. Flaming Heart. I'm going to add a big old splash of water here. And add it to taste. Add it to taste. There's no right or wrong. I'll give it a minute or so for the water and the whiskey to come together and talk about the cheeses. So, a classic British cheese. We're big fans of Farmhouse cheeses. And we've sourced today these cheeses from Neal's Yard Dairy here in London, not too far from our blending room in Covent Garden. Kirkham's Lancashire. A classic British cheese. It's got this lovely sort of crumbly texture and a tanginess to it. Think of it as cheddar-like. If you're not familiar with it, it's got a succulence to it and works really well with this whiskey. And then we'll come to Beanley Blue. So I like to start by having a sip of the whiskey, then the cheese or the food, whatever you're pairing with, and then go back to the whiskey. And you'll see with cheese, one of three things tends to happen. The flavors of the cheese and the whiskey complement one another. Sometimes they contrast with one another in a really positive and delicious way. And sometimes you find one or the other will amplify flavors in the other. That's part of the fun of matching whiskey with cheese, is seeing what happens. Peat and depth, a sweetness and a spice, a baking spice that comes from the French oak. A piece of this cheese. I've got the fattiness of the cheese covering your palate. This is one of the reasons whiskey works so well with cheese, that fattiness. Whiskey does a really good job of cutting through that. Contrast of the creaminess of the cheese and the spice characters and the peat and the whiskey. Lovely. I'd like to have more of that. I'll have to come back to that later. Beanley Blue. This is Devon. This is sheep's milk cheese from Devon. But it's a very mild blue. We do think of blue cheeses as generally, I'm going to use my fingers, excuse me, going well with peaty whiskeys. Again, it's a complementary thing. Blue just seems to complement peat flavors and spice in this case. I think I'm about to find out. That's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. It's just so savory in your mouth. Flavors are bouncing off one another. There's a great amalgamation of flavor. Absolutely delicious. What I've tried to do here is inspire you to find a great cheesemonger if you don't have one, hopefully one that specializes in farmhouse cheeses, and experiment matching your whiskeys with cheese. A lot of pleasure to be had with that. Cheers.